Welcome. Today we're diving into a crucial conversation from the hit academic podcast, the 2026 SLA Shift, with Dr. Elena Rostova and Dr. Vance. Generative AI is completely transforming language learning by offering instant feedback and conversational practice. But are teachers being replaced? The short answer, absolutely not. Competent, research-driven educators are irreplaceable. Instead, AI is stepping in as a classroom assistant to handle time-consuming planning and grading, giving teachers more time for authentic human connection and mentorship. But there is a catch. The hosts also unpack a sobering new UNESCO and CIMO report warning about a massive digital divide, reminding us that EdTech must be driven by the actual needs of learners and teachers, not just the technology itself. Let's jump right into the episode.
Right now, the average teacher works what is essentially a full-time job just standing in front of a room.
Right.
Just managing the classroom dynamics, delivering the instruction, and navigating the emotional needs of 30 totally different human beings.
All at the exact same time.
Exactly. And then when the final bell rings, they go home to work. Well, basically a 10-hour part-time job just pushing paper.
Yeah. The invisible labor.
Right. Lesson planning, grading, data entry, compliance tracking. It is just this invisible mountain of labor.
Yeah.
So when we ask you, the listener, to imagine a classroom 20 years from now, it is very easy to fall into extremes.
Oh, absolutely.
You might picture this pristine, quiet room where rows of students are locked into these isolated pods, just staring at glowing screens.
Like a sci-fi movie.
Yeah, exactly. While some AI avatar perfectly delivers customized content, and the human teacher in this scenario.
Completely obsolete.
Completely obsolete. Welcome to another session in the Research Lab. Today, we are looking directly into the heart of that exact anxiety, but we are moving far past the clickbait headlines of robots taking over the world.
Because those extremes, the dystopian robot teacher future on one hand, or the utopian fantasy where technology just magically solves every systemic issue on the other, they really don't serve us.
No, they don't.
They distract us from the messy, on-the-ground reality. What we actually need to examine is the incredibly complex and, frankly, inevitable collision of artificial intelligence, digital infrastructure, and global education.
Right.
We need to figure out how this technology is fundamentally altering the mechanics of teaching, and by extension, the mechanics of how you, me, and the next generation actually acquire knowledge.
And to anchor this conversation, as two senior academic researchers, we are synthesizing a really fascinating stack of material today for a cohesive narrative we're calling the 2026 SLA Shift.
Yes, a major shift in second language acquisition, and really student learning architectures as a whole.
We aren't just looking at one narrow viewpoint here. We're taking the perspective of American educational leadership, specifically looking at a deeply grounded analysis from an Education Week opinion piece by University Dean Ingrid Guerra-López.
Which is a fantastic piece.
It really is. Then we are going to look at the micro level of specific subjects, pulling from the academic journal research papers in language teaching and learning.
Our PLTL, yeah.
Right, looking specifically at their latest call for proposals on generative AI. And finally, we're going to zoom way out to a massive macro scale.
Global perspective.
Exactly, using a comprehensive global education monitoring report from UNESCO, which was produced in collaboration with CIMEL, that's the Southeast Asian Ministers of Education Organization.
A massive stack of data.
It is. And our mission is to use these different lenses to figure out if this technological integration is actually making us smarter, or if it's just making the act of education infinitely more complicated. Okay, let's unpack this. I want to start with the panic itself because, well, it is quantifiable.
It is highly quantifiable, and it's pervasive. You see it in the media, you see it in faculty lounges, and you definitely see it in the research.
According to the data cited in that EdWeek piece, a recent Pew Research Center survey found that nearly 1/3 of experts predict AI could put teaching jobs at risk within 2 decades.
Well, 1 in 3.
1 in 3 experts. Looking at the trajectory of artificial intelligence and concluding that the human educator might just be pushed out of the market entirely.
Which is terrifying.
If you are currently in a credential program or, if you've been teaching for 5 years, that is an existential threat. But I want to pause here because who exactly are these experts?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right. Are we talking about technologists projecting software capabilities, or are we talking about educators looking at classroom reality?
Well, it's a mix, and that is part of the issue with how these surveys are often interpreted. When technologists evaluate a profession, they tend to break it down into this checklist of tasks.
Right, just inputs and outputs. Exactly. Delivering information, assessing retention, logging data. And if you view teaching merely as the transmission of data from point A to point B,
Then yeah, an algorithm wins every time.
an algorithm can absolutely do that faster and more accurately than a human.
Yeah.
But as Ingrid Guerra-López points out, and she's the dean of the College of Education and Human Development at George Mason University, that framework completely misunderstands both what AI actually excels at and what a teacher fundamentally does.
It misses the human element entirely.
Completely. Her core argument is that the panic is misplaced. Competent, research-driven teachers are not going to be replaced by AI. They are going to be augmented by it.
Let's explore that augmentation, because this is where those 10 hours of invisible labor that we talked about earlier come back into play.
Right.
The EdWeek article draws on data from RAND and the National Center for Education Statistics, and they quantify that teachers currently spend nearly 10 hours a week just on lesson planning and grading.
Just on those two things.
10 hours. Over a typical 36-week school year, that is 360 hours.
That is 9 full work weeks of unpaid behind-the-scenes labor. And that doesn't even touch the time spent searching for supplementary materials or analyzing standardized test data or drafting communication to families.
Exactly. And this is the critical intersection of technological capability and human bandwidth. We really have to look at what generative AI actually is.
Right. It's not magic.
No, it's not. It is essentially a highly sophisticated prediction engine that excels at the rapid generation of text, structure, and synthesis. It is built to organize language and data. So when we talk about augmentation, the EdWeek piece outlines how forward-thinking educators are already utilizing this.
They aren't handing the keys over to the machine.
Not at all. They aren't asking the AI to teach the class. They're asking it to generate a draft lesson plan that perfectly aligns with a highly specific state standard.
Let's walk through what that actually looks like in practice, because I think people outside the classroom struggle to visualize this.
Yeah, let's ground it.
Let's say you have a classroom of 30 kids. 5 of them are reading 2 grade levels below the rest of the class, and 5 are reading significantly above grade level.
A very common scenario.
Super common. Historically, differentiating that lesson means the teacher is essentially planning 3 separate lessons for the exact same 50-minute period.
Right. And doing that well takes hours of prep time for just a single day of instruction.
Which is why so many teachers burn out.
Exactly. But with generative AI, a teacher can input the core reading material and the learning objective, and instantly ask the system to draft variations of the assignment.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It can simplify the vocabulary for the struggling readers without changing the core concepts, and it can generate higher-order analytical questions for the advanced readers.
All in seconds.
In seconds. It can take a raw spreadsheet of assessment data from a Friday quiz and instantly summarize the trends, highlighting exactly which standard the majority of the class missed. It can even draft templates for family outreach.
It's drafting the email. I think people outside of education severely underestimate the emotional labor involved in crafting communication.
Oh, definitely.
Imagine figuring out how to word a delicate, empathetic, yet clear email to a parent about a struggling student.
And having to do it at 4:30 on a Friday afternoon.
When you are already exhausted, having an AI draft that first version so you just have to review and tweak it, that is a massive relief of cognitive load. And I really want to push back on something here.
Go for it.
The EdWeek piece argues that saving even 30 minutes a day can be the difference between a teacher burning out and staying in the profession.
Right.
Is 30 minutes really going to stop someone from quitting? Because to me, 30 minutes against a 10-hour paperwork deficit sounds like a drop in the bucket.
That sounds a bit naive.
Right. It sounds a bit like a corporate wellness seminar telling an overworked employee to just, try 5 minutes of deep breathing to cure systemic burnout.
That is a very fair skepticism. And if you look at it purely as minutes on a clock, 30 minutes seems totally negligible.
Yeah.
But we have to analyze what those 30 minutes actually represent. In cognitive psychology, there is a concept called decision fatigue.
Okay.
Teachers make an estimated 1,500 decisions a day.
That is wild.
It is. And most of those are micro decisions about behavior, pacing, and interaction. When you reach the end of the day, having to stare at a blank screen to draft an email, or staring at a blank planner to structure tomorrow's lesson, that requires a massive activation of executive function.
The blank page problem.
Exactly. By offloading the blank page problem to an AI, you are just saving 30 minutes of typing. You are preserving the emotional and cognitive energy of the educator.
You're keeping them out of the red.
Yes. It is the difference between starting at 0 and starting at 60%.
Right.
In a profession facing severe shortages globally, finding sustainable work-life balance isn't just about factory line efficiency.
Right.
It's about psychological preservation.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense when you frame it around cognitive offloading. The analogy that comes to mind isn't a substitute teacher who walks in and takes over your job.
No.
It sounds more like an exoskeleton. You know, like in science fiction where a worker steps into a mechanical suit?
Oh, I like that.
The suit does the heavy lifting. It sorts the data, it drafts the text, handles the repetitive strain. But the human being is still inside the suit.
Right.
The human is still doing the steering, making the ethical choices, and deciding where to walk.
I think the exoskeleton is the perfect metaphor for what Guerra-López is describing. And the mechanism that connects the human to that exoskeleton is a concept she calls discernment.
Discernment. Okay.
This is crucial. The AI's output is never the final product. It is a highly capable rough draft. It absolutely requires human review to evaluate its appropriateness, its factual accuracy, and its contextual nuance.
Because the AI doesn't actually know anything.
Right. A large language model has no concept of empathy. It doesn't know that a specific student just lost a grandparent and needs a lighter cognitive load today.
Yeah.
Or that another student learns fractions best when you relate it to their specific obsession with baking.
The machine doesn't know the humans in the room.
Precisely. The AI handles the routine, the structure, and the data processing. But the human educator handles the connection, the professional judgment, and the mentorship.
The actual teaching.
Yes. The profound acts of thinking, reflecting, and meaning-making, those remain firmly human responsibilities.
And for you listening right now, why should you care about this distinction, even if you don't work in a school?
Right.
Because whether you are a university student, a parent navigating the school system, or a professional trying to upskill in your career, the quality of your education depends almost entirely on the bandwidth of your instructor. If your mentor or teacher is drowning in administrative tasks, they are not looking at you. They are not identifying your specific blind spots or giving you the mentorship you actually need. If this technological exoskeleton gives them their time back, you are the one who benefits from their renewed focus.
What's fascinating here is how quickly we succumb to historical amnesia every single time a new technology arrives in the educational space.
We always think the sky is falling.
Always. Guerra-López touches on this, and if you look back at the historical record, it is a repeating cycle. When the radio became widespread in the 1920s and 30s, there were serious predictions that students would just listen to master teachers broadcast from centralized locations.
Making local teachers obsolete.
Exactly. In the 1950s, there were massive funded experiments with airborne television.
Wait, airborne television?
Literally planes flying over the Midwest, broadcasting lessons to televisions in classrooms. The thought was that the teacher could just sit in the back and supervise.
That is insane. And let me guess, the handheld calculator in the 70s and 80s was going to destroy the need for math teachers entirely.
Exactly. And the internet in the 90s. Every single one of these tools was greeted with predictions of human obsolescence.
But that never happened.
But that never happened. Because education is not just information delivery. Instead, each of these technologies simply changed pedagogy.
The how?
Yes, they changed the methods and practices of teaching. They simultaneously reinforce how irreplaceable the human teacher is in helping a student actually navigate and synthesize the complexity of the information they are receiving.
That makes perfect sense. The calculator didn't eliminate math teachers. It just meant the teacher didn't have to spend weeks drilling long division.
Right.
They could move past basic arithmetic and start teaching conceptual algebra and problem solving much earlier. The tool handled the calculation. The human taught the logic. So, if AI is essentially the new calculator, how does it actually change the mechanics of how a specific subject is taught today? Let's transition from the macro perspective of saving teacher time to zooming in on something deeply, intimately human. Let's look at learning a new language. This brings us to the core of the 2026 SLA shift we're exploring today.
This is where we shift to our second source, and it provides some deeply specific insights. We're looking at a call for proposals from the academic journal research papers in language teaching and learning.
RPLTL.
Yes. The guest editors for this special issue, Dr. Maria Perafano and Dr. Athanasios Kerasimos, are focusing entirely on generative AI in language education. They're mapping out exactly how tools like ChatGPT, specialized AI chatbots, and adaptive learning platforms are fundamentally reshaping the pedagogy of language acquisition.
And the specifics they outline in this call for proposals, I mean, it's a massive leap from what we traditionally think of as language tech.
Okay.
We aren't talking about a basic spell checker or a digital flashcard app here. We are looking at AI tools that integrate complex speech recognition for real-time pronunciation training.
Let's break down how that actually works pedagogically.
Please.
In a traditional language classroom, a teacher has 30 students. If they want to practice pronunciation, they might do choral repetition where everyone speaks at once.
Which totally masks individual errors.
Right, you can't hear the one kid mispronouncing a vowel, or the teacher calls on one student at a time, meaning each student might get, 30 seconds of personalized pronunciation feedback per week?
Which is nowhere near enough to actually build muscle memory in a new language. You need constant repetition.
Exactly. But with these new generative tools, a student can speak directly into a device, and the AI analyzes the acoustic properties of their speech.
In real time.
In real time. It maps their phones against a massive data set of native speakers, evaluating fluency, intonation, and accuracy. It then provides immediate, individualized feedback.
So it's basically a private tutor.
Yes. It can isolate the exact syllable the student is struggling with and offer targeted exercises. It essentially acts as a highly specialized, infinitely patient tutor performing intelligent analysis of the learner's specific performance gaps.
And crucially, and this is a phrase from the journal source that I think is the most important concept in this entire section, the AI acts as a non-judgmental conversational partner.
A non-judgmental partner. From a psychological standpoint, that is revolutionary.
Anyone who has ever tried to learn a new language as an adult or, even as a self-conscious teenager knows exactly why that is so vital. It is terrifying to try and speak a language you barely know in front of other people.
It is. Let's explore the psychology behind that fear, because it is the biggest barrier to language acquisition. In linguistics, there is a concept called the affective filter.
The affective filter.
Right. It essentially means that when a learner experiences high anxiety, low self-confidence, or fear of embarrassment, their brain literally raises a filter that blocks the acquisition of language. It doesn't matter how good the lesson is. If the student is terrified of sounding foolish, of mispronouncing a word in front of their peers, or of making a grammatical error in front of a teacher they respect, they will not retain the information.
They're too busy surviving the social interaction to actually learn the syntax.
Precisely. By practicing with an AI chatbot, that affective filter is completely dismantled.
Because there's no judgment.
Exactly. The student can make a mistake. They can make the same mistake 50 times in a row without a single ounce of the social embarrassment they would feel in front of a human.
The AI doesn't care.
The AI does not get impatient. It does not sigh. It does not look at its watch. It simply gently corrects the error and provides another opportunity to try. It creates a completely safe sandbox for failure, which is the prerequisite for learning.
That is undeniably a superpower for a learner. To have a space where failure carries zero social weight. And this is but both the EdWeek piece and the Language Journal raise a massive critical warning flag here.
They do?
And it comes down to differentiating between two concepts: scaffolding versus outsourcing.
This is the tightrope that modern educators are desperately trying to walk right now.
Yeah.
The intended goal of these AI tools is to scaffold a student's thinking. Scaffolding in education means providing temporary, structured support as a student builds a new skill.
Just like physical scaffolding supports a building while the foundation is laid?
Exactly. And once the skill is secure, you remove the scaffolding.
Right, so the AI helps you form the sentence until you understand the grammar rules well enough to form it yourself.
Exactly. The danger, however, is that instead of using the tool as a scaffold, students will simply outsource their cognition to the machine entirely.
Why do the work if the machine does it perfectly?
Right. Guerra-López makes a strong point in her article that preparing students for the future means explicitly teaching them how to interact with AI responsibly. This is essentially a new form of information literacy.
We have to teach them how to use the tool, not just give it to them.
Yes. Before a student types a prompt into a chatbot to translate a text, they need to wrestle with the task themselves. They have to experience the friction of not knowing.
The productive struggle.
Exactly. And once the AI produces an output, the student cannot just accept it passively. They must be taught how to evaluate its factual accuracy and how to spot inherent bias or hallucinations in the text.
Because if a student is tasked with writing an essay in French and they just use an AI to generate the text and submit it without understanding a single word of the syntax or vocabulary, they haven't learned French.
Not a single word.
They haven't built any neural pathways related to language. They have solely learned how to operate a machine to produce a product. Which brings up a question I've really been wrestling with as I synthesize these two sources.
Like that.
If we spend all our time talking to non-judgmental machines, if we use them to perfectly smooth out the learning process so we never feel that spike of embarrassment or awkwardness or social friction, do we lose the resilience required to speak to real, messy, deeply judgmental humans?
That is a profound pedagogical question.
Because eventually, you aren't learning French just to have a flawless conversation with ChatGPT in your bedroom.
Right.
You're learning French so you can go to Paris, walk into a cafe, and order a coffee from a real human waiter who might actually judge your accent, who might speak too fast, or who might use slang the AI never taught you.
The real world is messy.
The real world has friction. And the Ed Week piece explicitly states that connection, belonging, and care remain firmly in the teacher's domain. So how does the teacher bridge that gap?
The teacher's role evolves into exactly that, the bridge. The technology creates the safe sandbox for mechanical practice, but the sandbox cannot become the entire world.
Right.
The human teacher must facilitate the application of that skill in a human context. So a student might practice the vocabulary and pronunciation of ordering food with the AI until they are mechanically proficient.
They get the reps in.
Yes. But then the teacher sets up a dynamic, unpredictable group simulation in the classroom. Now, the students have to negotiate meaning with each other.
With real people.
Yes. They have to read body language, handle interruptions, and navigate the sheer unpredictability of human conversation. The AI handles the mechanical foundation, the human handles the nuance and the social resilience.
So for you listening, whether you are trying to learn a language before a trip or trying to pick up a complex new technical skill for your career, the practical application here is really clear.
Very clear.
You should absolutely leverage AI to build your initial confidence in private. Let it correct your code, let it fix your grammar, let it be your infinitely patient sounding board.
Use the tool.
Use it. But you cannot stop there. You still fundamentally need a human community, a teacher, a mentor, a peer group to apply that skill meaningfully. The machine can validate your syntax, but it cannot validate your human experience.
That is a perfect synthesis of the pedagogical shift.
Okay.
However, we have to acknowledge a massive blind spot in this conversation so far.
Uh-oh. Okay.
This entire discussion about personalized AI tutors, real-time acoustic analysis, and seamless digital scaffolding relies on a very fundamental, very privileged assumption.
That everyone actually has access to this stuff.
Exactly. It assumes the learner actually has a functional device and a reliable internet connection.
And that is the perfect, albeit sobering, transition, because it is incredibly inspiring to talk about these cutting-edge pedagogical shifts when we are picturing a well-funded university setting or, a suburban high school.
Right.
But what happens when we zoom out to a global scale? How do these tools function in regions where basic digital infrastructure is not a guarantee? This is where our third source hits the table, and it completely reframes the conversation.
It really does.
We are looking at the UNESCO Global Education Monitoring Report, the GEM report, done in collaboration with CMEO, the Southeast Asian Ministers of Education Organization.
This report is a monumental piece of research. It doesn't just look at a single school district. It analyzes the swiftly evolving digital landscape across Southeast Asia over the past 15 years.
Which is a huge, diverse area.
We are talking about a region that encompasses incredible diversity, economically, geographically, and culturally. You have highly developed urban centers and deeply remote rural populations. And the report begins by documenting a massive, undeniable surge in digital infrastructure.
The growth has been wild.
Over the last decade and a half, Southeast Asia has been positioned as having some of the fastest growing internet use on the planet.
And it's important to start with the wins, because the report highlights some truly incredible positives where technology has tangibly expanded access.
Let's hear them.
For example, let's look at the Philippines. The report details how higher education students are utilizing micro-credentials that integrate seamlessly with their traditional university studies.
Let's unpack how that works, because it's a great example of structural flexibility. A traditional four-year degree can be rigid, but the economy is shifting rapidly. In the Philippines, a student can be pursuing a traditional degree, but simultaneously acquire a specialized digital micro-credential in, say, data analytics or a specific coding language provided through an online platform.
That's incredibly smart.
It allows them to adapt to new career trends in real time without abandoning their foundational education.
The scale of information distribution is also staggering. The Philippines reported that over 4,500 open education resources, these are freely accessible, openly licensed educational materials, reached a staggering 10.5 million unique users in 2021 alone.
10.5 million.
That is not just a digital library. That is the democratization of knowledge on a massive population-wide scale.
And we see different nations leveraging different types of technology based on their specific geographic challenges. Thailand, for instance, utilizes distance learning television, or DLT.
Television, not internet.
Right. They use television programs to reach over 1 million students in remote, mountainous areas where broadband internet might be impossible to lay, but a satellite dish can receive a signal.
That makes total sense.
They use this specifically to combat severe teacher shortages in those rural areas.
We also see highly developed infrastructure in places like Singapore, where the report notes they have integrated advanced assistive technologies to mainstream students with disabilities.
Ensuring equitable access.
Exactly. Remarkably, 96% of students in Singapore attend schools equipped with comprehensive online learning platforms. Even in a massive, geographically fragmented country like Indonesia, 59% of students are in schools with online platforms.
That's huge.
These are undeniable achievements. We are talking about leveraging tech to reach millions of learners who historically might have been entirely excluded from quality education.
But, and as you noted earlier, it is a very heavy but.
Yeah. Here we go.
The report does not just celebrate the infrastructure. It lays bare the devastating inequality that often shadows it. The negatives presented in the data are stark.
Tell me about it.
While the overall numbers of connectivity are up, the distribution of that connectivity is deeply skewed. The report explicitly states that students hailing from wealthier households are nearly 8 times more likely to have home internet connectivity than their less privileged peers.
8 times.
8 times.
That isn't a slight gap, that is a chasm.
It is a systemic barrier, and the urban-rural divide is just as glaring. Urban students are twice as likely to engage with computers compared to rural students.
Wow.
So, when we talk about AI providing personalized tutoring, we have to recognize that it is only tutoring the students who already have the resources to access it.
To really visualize this, the analogy that pops into my head when reading these statistics is infrastructure planning.
How so?
It is exactly like a government deciding to build a state-of-the-art billion-dollar superhighway. It is an absolute marvel of engineering. It's perfectly paved. There's no speed limit. It connects major hubs seamlessly.
Sounds great.
The government celebrates this incredible achievement, but then you look at the reality on the ground and realize that only 10% of the population actually owns a car. The highway is objectively fantastic, but it does absolutely nothing to help the 90% of the population who are still walking. In fact, it actively makes the inequality worse, because the wealthy who own cars can now get to their economic destinations exponentially faster, leaving the poor even further behind.
That is a brilliant analogy.
That 8 times wealth multiplier for connectivity means the digital superhighway is primarily serving those who already have a massive head start.
That is exactly the dynamic the UNESCO GEM report team and CMEO are trying to combat.
Yep.
To address this, they advocate for a policy approach they call the Tech on Our Terms campaign.
Tech on our terms.
Yes, hashtag Tech on Our Terms. The core philosophy of this campaign is a direct, vocal challenge to a mindset known as tech solutionism.
Let's define tech solutionism for the listener, because it is pervasive in how we talk about progress.
Tech solutionism is the incredibly naive, often corporate-driven belief that simply dropping digital devices into a country or district or a classroom magically fixes underlying educational inequities.
Right. It is the false idea that the hardware itself contains the pedagogy.
Exactly.
It's the administrator standing up at a press conference and saying, "We just bought 1,000 iPads for the district. Our standardized test scores should double by next year." As if the tablet itself emits a localized field of intelligence.
It completely ignores the human ecosystem required to make that tool function.
Right.
The Tech on Our Terms campaign argues forcefully that educational platforms, software, and policies must be designed around the actual localized needs of the learners and the teachers.
Not the tech companies.
Precisely. They cannot just be driven by global technology companies looking to expand their user base and secure government contracts. Ministries of education must demand balanced integration. Because, as your highway analogy points out, if a government just floods a country with online resources and AI tools without simultaneously aggressively addressing the connectivity gap and the hardware gap,
They aren't democratizing education, they are accelerating inequality.
if we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to look back at the defining global event of the last decade, the COVID-19 pandemic.
Oh, man. Yeah.
The UNESCO report touches on this heavily. During the pandemic, technology acted as an incredible pillar of resilience. Without Zoom, without learning management systems, education would have ceased entirely for a year or more.
It kept learning alive for millions.
It did. But simultaneously, that global stress test exposed exactly how fragile and inequitable that access really is. The technology worked flawlessly for the upper and middle classes, but the distribution of that technology utterly failed the most vulnerable populations.
The pandemic forced us to realize that internet access is no longer a luxury. It is a fundamental prerequisite for participating in modern society.
See utility.
Exactly. But the UNESCO report pushes us to look even deeper. Because even when the technology does successfully reach the classroom, even when the superhighway is built and the students actually have the cars, we have to evaluate the actual cost of implementation.
And it's a steep cost.
And I don't just mean the financial cost of buying the laptops. I mean the emotional, professional, and instructional costs placed on the educators who are suddenly forced to use them.
This is a massive and frankly quite depressing section of the CMEO report because it highlights that buying the exoskeleton is completely useless if you don't teach the person how to operate it.
Right. The data they gathered on teacher confidence and teacher stress is deeply concerning.
It really is.
The report surveyed primary school teachers across a wide swath of nations: Cambodia, Lao PDR, Malaysia, Myanmar, the Philippines, and Vietnam. Across that massive data set, nearly 1/3 of the teachers expressed that they were not at all confident in using information and communication technology, ICT, in their classrooms.
1 in 3 teachers feels fundamentally unequipped to use the tools they are being mandated to use.
Yes. And in Malaysia specifically, the report notes that teachers explicitly cited high stress levels that were directly linked to IT tasks.
Wow.
It wasn't the teaching that was burning them out, it was the technology.
And what happens when a professional is forced to use a tool they don't understand and that causes them stress?
They abandon it.
They abandon it. The report provides a staggering statistic on actual usage. It notes that about 9 out of 10 math teachers in Cambodia and Lao PDR report that they never or hardly ever incorporate ICT into their teaching.
9 out of 10.
9 out of 10. They have the mandate, they might even have the devices, but the integration is functionally zero.
I wonder why it's so high specifically for math teachers.
Well, it likely speaks to the traditional pedagogy of mathematics, which is often deeply tied to step-by-step physical demonstration.
Writing it out.
Right, writing out the equation on a board so students can follow the logic sequence. Translating that highly visual step-by-step process into a digital format requires specific software and specific training.
Which they aren't getting.
Exactly. If you don't provide that training, the teacher will naturally revert to the chalkboard because it is what actually works for their students.
That makes total sense.
This ties perfectly back to Ingrid Guerra-López's warning in the EdWeek article. She explicitly cautions that without proper, ongoing training and preparation, AI and new generative tech will simply follow the exact same path as past educational innovations.
Oh, let me guess.
She specifically calls out the era of interactive whiteboards.
Oh, man. I remember the interactive whiteboard craze so vividly.
We all do. It is the textbook example of tech solutionism. Over the last 2 decades, school districts globally spent millions, probably billions of dollars, ripping out chalkboards and installing these highly expensive, touch-sensitive smartboards into classrooms.
They were pitched as the ultimate solution. Administrators introduced them with massive enthusiasm. Every classroom of the future had to have one.
But the implementation was entirely focused on the hardware.
Right.
The teachers rarely received ongoing subject-specific training on how to actually change their instructional methods to utilize the interactive features. So what happened?
They became really expensive projection screens.
Exactly. These incredibly expensive, highly capable devices essentially devolved into projection screens. Teachers used them to display static PowerPoint slides or show YouTube videos.
I've seen that so many times.
The boards gathered dust, or their calibration broke and was never fixed. They became physical symbols of progress that administrators could point to during school tours, but they did not fundamentally change the pedagogy occurring in the room.
And here's where it gets really interesting to me. We have all this money being spent on hardware. We have these massive learning management systems being pushed into rooms. We have millions of data points being generated by students clicking through digital quizzes.
Yep.
And yet, despite all this data, we often don't actually know if any of it is working. The CMEO report contains a statistic that legitimately stopped me in my tracks.
Which one?
They surveyed over 200 division ICT coordinators in the Philippines. These are the people literally in charge of implementing the technology. And 41% of them stated that they never conduct impact evaluations of the technology they deploy.
Wow. It is a stunning admission.
Never. It means they are installing the software, handing out the devices, and never going back to ask, did this actually improve reading comprehension? Did this raise math scores? Did this make the teachers' lives easier?
They're just blindly deploying it.
They are just assuming that because it is digital, it is inherently better. And even in wealthy, highly connected nations with massive infrastructure, the actual instructional usage is shocking.
Right.
In Singapore and Brunei nations renowned for their educational systems, a mere 8% of 15-year-old students use digital devices for more than 1 hour per week, specifically in math and science instruction.
That 8% figure really highlights a critical principle that the UNESCO report emphasizes. Digital inputs must never take precedence over learning outcomes.
Say that again?
Digital inputs must never take precedence over learning outcomes. If a Ministry of Education is only collecting data on how many laptops they purchased or how many schools have Wi-Fi, but they are completely failing to evaluate whether those laptops are actually moving the needle on literacy or numeracy,
They are flying blind.
they are flying blind. They are confusing the act of purchasing with the act of pedagogy.
It is the ultimate illusion of action. We bought the laptops, our job is done, the problem is solved.
Exactly. And the hidden costs of this blind, unevaluated push toward digitalization are astronomical. When we talk about AI, we tend to think of it as this ethereal, cloud-based magic.
It's just in the cloud, right?
But it requires massive physical infrastructure. The UNESCO report estimates that just to connect all the remaining lower-middle-income schools in the Southeast Asian region to the internet would require a capital expenditure of $18 billion US.
18 billion with a B.
$18 billion just to lay the groundwork.
And that is just the financial capital. There's also the issue of data capital. During the massive rush to online learning during the pandemic, millions of children were thrust onto digital platforms, and their data was inevitably exposed.
That's a huge concern.
The report notes that less than a third of the countries in the region currently have adequate legal measures in place to guarantee data privacy, specifically in education. We are feeding student data into commercial algorithms without fully understanding the long-term privacy implications.
Not to mention the devastating physical toll this infrastructure takes on the planet. This is an entirely different type of hidden cost. Exactly. The report briefly touches upon an e-waste tally reaching 12.3 million tons. Think about the life cycle of a cheap educational laptop. It is purchased, it is heavily used by a child, it becomes obsolete or broken within 3 to 4 years, and it is discarded.
And then what?
Right. There is almost no comprehensive region-wide legislation regulating what happens to these millions of toxic devices when they die.
12.3 million tons of plastic, lithium, and heavy metals. So when we sit here and marvel at the magic of an AI instantly generating a lesson plan or a chatbot offering perfect real-time pronunciation feedback, we have to hold that marvel in tension with the reality on the ground.
We have to.
We have to balance the magic against the $18 billion price tag, the 12 million tons of toxic e-waste, and the crushing stress placed on an undertrained, unsported teacher in a rural school who is suddenly expected to become a network IT specialist just to teach a math lesson.
It is a profound responsibility.
I want to connect this directly to you, the listener. Think about your own workplace. Think about the last time a massive new software platform or a new project management tool was forced onto your team by upper management.
We've all been there.
Leadership buys the software, they send out a highly enthusiastic company-wide email about how this will revolutionize workflow, but they don't actually provide comprehensive training on how to migrate your old systems into the new one.
Nope.
And crucially, they never bother to follow up 6 months later to check if it actually made your job easier, what usually happens.
You end up doing the work twice.
The tool just creates double data entry. It doesn't make you faster. It just becomes a massive source of stress, resentment, and inefficiency. The exact same dynamic, driven by the exact same lack of systemic support, is happening to teachers on a global scale.
Right out.
We are demanding that they step into the AI exoskeleton, but we are refusing to show them how to plug it in, and we aren't checking if the suit actually fits.
Which brings us back to where we started this entire deep dive into the 2026 SLA Shift. The core tension between the theoretical promise of technology and the messy reality of the human experience.
Exactly.
If we try to synthesize everything we've looked at today, from the administrative burden of the American classroom to the psychological nuances of the language learning lab, all the way to the vast, complex educational infrastructure of Southeast Asia, a very clear, nuanced picture emerges.
What's the bottom line?
Technology, and specifically generative AI, are incredible, world-altering tools. When applied correctly, they offer unprecedented efficiency for overworked, burnt-out teachers. They offer non-judgmental, infinite patience for anxious learners trying to master a new skill.
Right.
And they offer an absolute lifeline of access to remote populations who might otherwise have no connection to global knowledge.
But they're absolutely not a silver bullet.
Cool.
They do not magically fix the systemic issues of education simply by existing in the room. They require massive, sustained financial investment. They require rigorous, careful policy oversight to ensure they don't simply widen the existing chasm between the wealthy and the poor.
Yes.
And most importantly, more than anything else, they require human wisdom to guide their use.
I think that is the ultimate takeaway. In the conclusion of her EdWeek piece, Ingrid Guerra-López quotes the famous management theorist Peter Drucker.
Oh, I love this quote.
It's a quote that perfectly encapsulates the danger of tech solutionism. He once warned that there is nothing so useless as doing efficiently that which should not be done at all.
Wow. That is brilliant. Let me repeat that. There is nothing so useless as doing efficiently that which should not be done at all.
It perfectly frames our challenge. AI can give us unprecedented, staggering efficiency. It can generate a comprehensive lesson plan or cross-reference a syllabus against state standards or grade a 50-question multiple-choice quiz in absolute milliseconds.
It can do the what faster than any human in history.
Right. But it cannot give us purpose. It cannot tell a teacher what truly deserves their effort. It cannot discern why a particular student is suddenly withdrawing and needs extra care today.
Because it doesn't know them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It cannot decide what knowledge is actually culturally and emotionally valuable for a community to pass down to its children. Only human beings can do that. Technology can make us incredibly fast, but only human wisdom makes us better.
There is nothing so useless as doing efficiently that which should not be done at all. That concept is going to stick with me for a long time. As we wrap up this deep dive in the research lab, I want to leave you, the listener, with one final, slightly provocative thought to mull over on your own as you go about your week.
Let's hear it.
We've talked a lot today about AI removing friction. It saves precious time for exhausted teachers. It removes the painful social embarrassment for language learners. It smooths out the rough edges of the educational process. But friction is often where the spark of learning actually occurs. If AI eventually becomes so seamlessly integrated, so incredibly good, that it completely removes all the friction, all the frustration, and all the routine struggle from learning what happens to the human brain.
That is the big question.
Does the total removal of the cognitive struggle also remove the deep, long-term retention of the knowledge? The next time you are tempted to use an AI to quickly solve a complex problem or to instantly draft an email that you are struggling to word, pause for just a second and ask yourself, did I just learn something, or did I just outsource my thinking entirely?
It is the vital question we all must answer in the years ahead.
We'll leave you with that. Keep questioning the glowing screens, interrogate the technology that is handed to you, and never, ever underestimate the profound value of a messy, judgmental, completely irreplaceable human interaction. Thank you for joining us in the Research Lab, and we will see you on the next Deep Dive.